Welcome into the Backroads Bill podcast. I'm Ben, and on today's episode, we are going to be talking about one of the only two flag stop trains left in Canada. Now, you might say, what is a flag stop train? Well, simply put, it's kind of like a bus. You can get on wherever you want. You can get off wherever you want within that run. This one runs from Sudbury to White River, and recently Bill actually took this journey with a couple of friends, and we decided to invite one of them on into this episode so that both of them can talk about the journey they recently went on. This weekend, make your way to Casey's Restaurant in North Bay for an unforgettable get-together. Dive into our delicious appetizers and enjoy the best drafts in town. It's the perfect spot to unwind, catch up with friends, and savor great flavors. Don't miss out on the fun. Join us at Casey's for a weekend filled with good food, great drinks, and even better company. So just before we get to our guest, I do want to give a little shout out here to Your TV North Bay, also known as Cogeco, one of our favorite media partners here at the Echo Community Podcast Network. We do promote their featured content in our Echo Essentials newsletter. And of course, they actually started to run some of our programs. So Echo Essentials, our podcast, is available every Monday at 7 p.m. now. So you can catch it on Cogeco every Monday at 7 p.m. Well, they also have some of the past shows that are sprinkled throughout their schedule on rotation as well. It's usually only about the first 28 minutes or so because of time constraints on cable, but you can always go back to NorthBayEcho.ca to see the full episode. The same way you can see and view this podcast as well. We are happy to have media partners like Your TV Cogeco, who also believe that local voices should be heard. So on today's episode, we are very thankful to bring to the show. Is that the right way of saying it? Bring to the show? I don't know. I'm getting tongue-tied. It's like last week.
The world awaits us, though, Ben, with that Cogeco thing. The world awaits us.
So we were hoping to have two guests on today. Unfortunately, Liz, who is Brian Emblem's wife, who's a friend of the show, who's been on the show probably like 4 or 5 times at this point. Unfortunately, they're on the East Coast. They don't have any signal right now. But we did bring in Teresa Taillefer. Teresa, welcome to the program.
Thank you kindly.
Well, Teresa and Liz are longtime friends going way, way back. So that's kind of nice that they were on that train ride, which we're going to talk about, Ben, that someday you'll get on that train, hopefully, if it doesn't disappear. And that's all part of this Backroads Bill podcast.
Yeah, I can't remember if we talked about it or mentioned it on our podcast, maybe the fall episodes we might have, but we have definitely talked about this because this was a couple of weeks ago you went. We definitely did talk about this off air. And because it goes, I believe, up to White River. You'll explain everything. I don't remember everything. But this is a really cool thing. So why don't you take us a little bit through, number one, what is a bud car? And where exactly did you take it? And we'll start off with that.
Well, with Teresa and her husband and Liz and Brian and a few others, and we'll get to that. The bud car, which it's locally known, is a train 185 to the west, 186 east, is operated by VIA. It's a passenger train. It's one of the two only flag stop trains in Canada, and it's a rail diesel car that were created in the 1950s, and it's the last of these stainless steel, sleek-looking cars that exist in North America from a railway buff perspective, and we'll talk about railway bus for sure. So anyway, this run... super quick, Bill. Can I just ask what a flag stop train is? Flag stop is whether you're on the rail line, you can wave a flag or put a cone out. Yeah. No, they can stop the train. Now, that's the nature of the train.
Like you're on the train or you're off the train?
Well, when you're on the train, you've told the conductor, service manager that you want to take your canoe, for instance, off the train. You're getting off at mileage, whatever. And if you're on the train, on the railway line somewhere over that, in this case, it's 301 miles, 484 kilometers. They kind of know the patrons, but anyway, you can actually flag it down. It could be an emergency. For most of the time, they're regular clientele. So yeah, trains, just as we know, GO trains and high-speed trains. Yeah, no, this is kind of like a different kind of train, and one of the only ones, two of only in Canada, and the design of the car There are basically only 3 cars. It's a small train. There's a baggage car and the 2 passenger cars, and the operator, the engineers are at both ends. So when they just turn, they just go to the other end. Anyway, these rail diesel cars are vintage and disappearing, and so that's the nature of this run. And this run is passenger service. It's baggage for the lodges and other communities along the way. And we'll say that in its third reason for running is as a tour train, but it's not known like a tour train like the Polar Bear Express or the Agawam Canyon, which I've been on both of them. I don't know about Teresa, but there people that were on there were real buff people who go around the world and ride excursion trains like the Rocky Mountaineer, and there were people on there that I interviewed that had been on that. So, and you can read the full story in Village Media, Backroads Bill, and I just did a CBC on it as well, because it's one of those things that the first question to me, Ben, you're going to ask me, why hadn't you been on this train before? Go ahead.
Well, Bill, why haven't you been on this train before, I guess?
Well, we're going to ask Teresa that as well. But
you can't just set up your own question.
Yes. It's
your podcast.
It's the Backroads Bill podcast. I can do what I want, kind of, but not really. So, yeah, no, I'm almost, I said that I'm kind of ashamed I've never been on this train. And I'll say this probably at the end. I'll say it right now. I highly recommend it because it could disappear. Trains do disappear. The train from Sault Ste. Marie to Hearst disappeared. The Agawam Canyon tour train still exists. But anyway, this train has been there for a long time. It runs 3 times a week, and we'll talk about the scenery that you're going to see. But I think that's enough of the background. So we've got to get Teresa into the conversation because she was a railway rider, a patron, and of course you go to White River, and we'll talk about this. You stay overnight and you come back because the train ride is 8 hours and a bit. And when we say a bit, freight always trumps, not Donald Trump, always trumps passenger. So sometimes you're waiting on a siding before the freights go east and west, and then eventually get to White River.
So, Teresa, before I ask you a question here, is there any question you want me to ask you? Do you want to set up your own question?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
It's not the Teresa podcast.
No.
So what I was gonna ask was just I wanted to hear a little bit about your experience on this because it kind of reminds me a little bit of a bus almost, where you can kind of get off, except there's not like the set stops, but it's kind of cool how you can kind of go and stop. Have you ever been on this train before, or that style of train?
Well, no, and I haven't been on it, but I had watched a program. I think it was on TVO about this train, and it was just like, I wonder if the Group of 7 have ever traveled on that train, or painters, and so it just was in the back of my mind that it's on my bucket list that I need to do. And so just one day in casual conversation, we were talking about with Brian and Liz around their adventures with Bill. And he said, "Oh, there's one thing we want to do is this train." And I want to do that. I got to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about painting. Painting's been kind of a mainstay on the show, I think, for the last few weeks. We had, of course, Corey Dingle from the Morrisseau Estate on talking about the fakes and all that stuff. We had Gerald on talking about Sasquatch Dam and the carving. Teresa, tell us a little bit about your painting, your work as an artist, and you talked a little bit about that inspiration or the people who potentially went on to that train. Just a little bit about your painting and any inspiration you got from this trip.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been like one of those kids that grew up and, handed their parents 1,000 pictures as a little girl, and then couldn't wait for art class. And I'm an okay painter, but not a wow over the top painter. So I knew it wasn't going to be a career, but it could be a really great hobby. And so I married a geologist, and that gives lots of opportunities to go in Northern Ontario, all over the place. And so you take that opportunity with the robust Group of Seven presence in Northern Ontario. That I have probably read every book about the Group of Seven that I could find. Go to as many art galleries as I can and find um, their work. So you couple the two together, and this ride just made sense that it would be one of the things as I slow down as an older person, get to do as an opportunity. So yeah, so I generally do acrylic and watercolor, and often, if I'm out in the field somewhere and I just want to do something quick, I use oil pastels. Sort of following in the Group of Seven, you do a little sketch where you are and get a sense about the environment and what you want to get out of it, and then you share it back later in whatever your finished work is.
Yeah. Now, the scenery kind of moves along very quickly, but I'm going to say this, and I've said this in one of my, I've said it a couple times in my story in Village Media and on the CBC, is that it's all about the water. Like, it's water everywhere, and we're blessed with water. And on this, more so than on a bus or a car, and I guess from a plane you'd recognize it, but on the train it was outstanding that we transitioned from that Great Lakes St. Lawrence deciduous forest into the boreal forest. But and as it meanders, as I said, the 301 miles, 484 kilometers through these communities into the Canadian Shield. But the water is everywhere, like on both sides. It's incredible. And of course, on one side we've got the Chapleau Game Preserve. The train runs along it for a while, but then into the wilderness, and you don't see much other than this changing landscape. And I'm going to say a couple things that people will notice, that on the Polar Bear Express, you're in a kind of like a tunnel of the boreal forest and the black spruce. And when you come out at Moose River Crossing, okay, and you get to Moose Factory, that's okay. And then on the Agua Tour, you get to the canyon and there's colors and things. But this train has, I think, great diversity. And I kind of like the length of it too, because of the changing nature of the landscape, and I think Teresa's noted that. But Teresa, tell us a little bit about, and I'll look forward to seeing what inspiration you got from the train. But tell us about your views of the passing landscape.
Well, it's interesting because I brought a book knowing it was like an 8-hour trip, but I couldn't read it because you wanted to look out the window, and it was, um, you know, like you said, lake, and then little bit of tree, and then a different lake, and I was looking at the different hues of the blue in the water to see if there was much of a difference. Um, uh, you know Casually or occasionally there was some rock, but not as much rock as I kind of thought. And I guess that's the thing for me, was if I hadn't gone on this train ride, I would never have seen this stuff because there's no parallel road or in most of it, right? So it did change the landscape as we journeyed, and lots of nice reflection of the sun, depending where we were at on the water. And it was just so kind of neat sometimes that there was a lake on one side and a lake on the other side, and then we'd come up to sort of what would have been a little bit of a community, but we'd have to see a sign or look at to find on a map where we were at, because it wasn't necessarily very clear from sitting in the window. But the landscape was amazing, and the sky that day, both days, were great colors as well. So you had so many blues, so many greens, and then because it was just not quite when the leaves start doing their massive bloom or color change, we were just at the edge. So we were looking for those crisp, different colors on the landscape.
And that ochre color.
That ochre. There was a couple of I'm not good with with the words for the geography part of things, but it would be a field of ochre, like a field of grass that was just so golden, and then water. So you had, if when I chose to start my first painting from this trip as the waterfalls that we had got all excited about. Everybody like, oh, let's mark it and see if we can get a picture on the way back. My second picture I will do is this ochre field with this vivid blue, and then there's got to be like the picture, the landscape had a fair amount of tamarack. I love tamarack, and there was one spot that we got to, and it was this beautiful ochre and these three solid tamarack right on the shore of a beautiful lake. It wasn't a big lake, but then the background was massive trees, and it's just the composition is perfect. And I can't wait to paint that one as well. But I started with the walls.
I can't wait to see it. And I'm going back to one of your great comments, or we wouldn't have seen it. And I've mentioned, I've been on many float planes, bush planes from that aerial perspective. You're right about the highways and things. There are lots of highways and byways that will take us into the back roads or back country. But this train, I think, and I think that's my main takeaway is that, I just wouldn't have seen this country other than for that train. And again, for the length, in our country, 301 miles, 484 kilometers is not that great, but we experienced it, and there was that great transition. And I don't want to beat that up. But Teresa also mentioned the TVO, because Mitch Azaria, the producer of, I think there's 5 now of those TVO slow.
Yeah, we had him for the French
River.
Yep.
To watch other than the audio they capture en route, there is no narration. They insert some vignettes on the heritage of the trip. But anyway, he explained how they mounted a camera on the front of the Bud car for shooting, and also they did their aerial shots were done by helicopter. The drone wouldn't work because the helicopter has to keep up with the train.
How fast does the train move? If you had to guess.
I think we kind of calculated that with an app. But anyway, its speed varies because we're slowing down the sidings and things like that.
But it's not as fast. Like, would you say it's as fast as like the GO trains or the passenger trains?
No. And plus the nature of the track too. They've got orders, so they can't speed up if they want to. So anyway, it's a leisurely pace, and so you do get to see. And I like the other comment about there's landscape on both sides. So the good thing, you get to see it from a different perspective the next day. And depending on which way you're sitting in the passenger car, things change. I spent a lot of time in between the cars trying to capture photos. And then for my print story, I'm a pretty good photographer. I probably took more pictures those 2 days, and it was difficult to sort out to get them down to say 12 or 14 photos. So my editor would not go crazy and say, well, that's too many pictures. But you write the cut lines and things like that. So it was kind of, I don't know, Teresa. We should try to think of some descriptors of that. I don't want to say it's breathtaking, but the diversity really strikes me. I don't know what you think. I mean, you've said some good things already.
You know what? You put it all together, I think, as part of the experience. It was what, for me, like the train's gently rocking, you hear the click, clickety click, you're looking outside at beautiful sky and water and tree line and these ochre fields of and you just, I don't know, it just got to be in a state where you weren't thinking about your phone or other priorities. You were enjoying the nature. And then, we were coming along at one point, and it's near almost into a community. And there somebody put like an old bench. And it was like, I got to have a photo of that. Like in the middle of beautiful trees and whatnot is this little wooden bench. And like, it's just, I've done the Agua, and I haven't done, for work, I had to go to Moosonee all the time, and I always flew, but I've done some other train trips, and definitely this one was one where I had more enthusiasm about it for some reason. Like, it just felt like it was a journey back in time, like that you were, and I could, just enjoy the experience.
Yeah, that rocking motion, you think about, I use that kind of comparison in the Prince story about being rocked like if you're in your parents' arms, but it's so genteel. And but again, you can not like the plane, not like the bus. You can get up, walk all around, take pictures, chat with other people. Very, very spacious. It's a totally different experience. In my Prince story, I said, something to the effect of let someone else do the driving and sit back. Well, that's it. I mean, and again, it's different. And again, we don't ride trains as much anymore unless we're a commuter in urban areas, and we're trying to, and probably work is on our mind. I know I didn't. There's no cell service anyway, other than when you go through Chapleau and a couple other places. So it's you're in the moments, and we're all grateful for that. We also had a conductor, service manager along, who was very affable and answered our questions. We had lots of questions, different funny questions and things like that. So that was good. Made sure too that we got off the train in White River, but got back on in the morning. Made sure we're at our motels, hotels, and took really good care of it. Again, it's not a passenger tour train per se. I stress the tour. It's more the passenger service to get there, and so that, I think Teresa's put it all together. It's a package with the landscape, the mode of transportation, just the hospitality of the whole thing. So, and again, I think whether it only has, Via told me, it has 7,134 patrons for the year. So do the math. It's highly subsidized. And so in the beginning I said, before this train might leave, you never know when things like that disappear, because those kinds of trains are highly subsidized, because in the wintertime, or for the vast majority of the year, there'd be no one on that train.
Yeah, and what I was wondering is, one of my questions was, why isn't it more popular? And the more you think about it, it's like, well, you can unless you're going someplace kind of remotely, or you're using a canoe, it's probably faster to just drive or take a plane or do something else.
The canoeists I interviewed, that was part of their experience, as Teresa said, that they wanted to take that canoe on and off the train, right? That was going to be part of their remembrance and their story. So yeah, that's neat. Along with the fishers that get on and off at the lodges, they purposely do that because, again, it's just something we don't do.
So we're talking Bud Car, we're talking transportation, and we're going to take a bit of a break from Teresa and that conversation to talk about another mode of transportation from one of our sponsors, Voyager Aviation, which was founded all the way back in 1968. Voyager Aviation is a proud member of our community, providing worldwide aviation services from their headquarters right here in North Bay, Bill.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking about that, Ben, Max Shapiro, the originator and president of Voyager Airways, I can remember one time I called him up and I said, I'd like to take my students, it was an enrichment exercise, I'd like to take them out for a viewscape of the forest in and around North Bay. And he said, yes. And then I said, well, there's X number of students. Well, he said, we'll have to take 2 trips. And lo and behold, we pulled off the 2 trips, and the students got to see the landscape in and around the North Bay area from a forestry perspective. And Voyager Airways have been around here for a long, long time, a mainstay of the North Bay economy. And so it's just nice to think about Voyager Airways and that story.
And they are hiring, so if you're looking for a challenge, change, or want to expand your current career in aviation, Voyager is hiring for a wide range of technical and non-technical roles, including pilots, aircraft maintenance personnel, corporate administration, machinists, supply chain professionals, and more. Bill, if you had to work at Voyager Aviation, what job, regardless of whether you have the skills or not, what job would you like to do?
Well, for sure, a pilot. I thought I'd be a bush plane pilot one time in life, and that perspective from the airway. And again, remembering that story is that when Max said, and I thought, oh, it was easy just asking somebody from a community perspective that they can take students up on the plane. It was like unheard of. So yes, I would want to be a pilot, Ben.
I think the aircraft maintenance would be interesting, but it would be very scary to consider that like there's a lot of lives on your, you just got to be careful that that nothing happens. I'd be very anxious about that, but it would be really cool to be able to say, hey, I work on airplanes. That'd be a cool job.
You take care with the Backroads Bill podcast, so I think you'd be a good aircraft mechanic.
Thank you. So if you do decide to go for Voyager Aviation, you can be part of a workforce that is over 400 strong. They support humanitarian, government, defense, and civil aviation operations around the world. For a career in aviation and beyond, learn more about open positions and career pathways at their website, voyav.com. And now, back to Teresa and the Bud Car. So if I'm going to pose this out to both of you guys, and I'll start with Bill first because I feel like he'll have a pretty good answer. If you were given an relatively unlimited budget, but not unlimited budget, marketing budget for this Bud Car, how would you get more people on it, and how would you try and sell this and build awareness over this mode of transportation?
I always have good answers, Ben. And so one thing I put in my story, they need to clean the windows because it is, if you're going to make it a tour train, I think you have to highlight the heritage of it and what you're going to see, because there was no preamble to this, really. You get on the train, you make of it what you will. So I think there has to be, like the fall colors or something, you have to really explain the wilderness value of that train ride. And wilderness comes because, other than the whistle stops, which were probably former small mill towns and the like, that's what so I think from a marketing perspective, I would market the wilderness. The Rocky Mountaineer, obviously, huge mountains and that kind of thing, and the water. So the wilderness, and so I'll turn it over to Teresa.
Well, the one thing that came to mind for me is because I'm from a family of artists, is that I would love to have the opportunity to go up with my two sisters and my mother, who all paint, and stay at one of those lodges and go to one of those paints. And just the experience of, I know they'd all love the train. And I know they'd love the concept of, getting off in the middle of, where you have to take a little trail and come to a little lodge. So the experience of it. So like Bill was saying, I get the way he would market it. I would organize and have a professional artist bring out a group of 20 budding artists to go stay at a lodge, have, come back on the train as well. I would use some groups that would want to experience that as well. Photographers.
Yeah. In the arts. Now, again, we found out a little bit that sometimes bus tours take this, so you have more people. Now, Ben, on this, there's just 2 passenger cars. The capacity is not that great unless they added more cars. But so I suspect with the stories and the TVO documentary, and there was increased traffic after the TV documentary. I'm sure there's more increased traffic after the podcast, the story, and on the CBC. Because right now, as we speak, and this will be released in a week or two, we're right at the peak. What will be coming in. I spoke about this yesterday. The colors are going to come really, really quickly. We saw tinges of it on our trip, and it was good. And so it'll be, I would think, being on the train up until the Thanksgiving weekend would be great. Again, it's nice that transition. Chapleau is about halfway in the trip, so then you start to move into the boreal forest and a lot of greens. But again, the tamarack, when they change, that's spectacular contrast.
You know what? This is what I would do.
Okay, Ben.
I would take you, Bill. I would stick you on the train, and you can explain everything and do the whole history as you go up and down the train, which you would love, by the way. And on top of that, I'll even let you make sure you get their questions asked from you.
I did that on the Chief Commando. I wrote a play.
Did you actually?
Play, yeah, there were 5 characters in costume. That was years ago. Yeah, it was, and did it on the Chief. I wasn't there. I wrote it, and then they had a actor. His last name was Dunn. I'll think of his first name. And he had all these questions, like a shadfly costume, a rock costume. There were some other costumes. Anyway, yeah, exactly. Like you have to. I think we got a little bit of that with the conductor/service manager. But yeah, I mean, if you had someone on the train that was actually doing that, going up and down, you could even add to that, or just again. A QR code, and you just here look out for this, and this is what they did in Biscoe Tasting, because Biscoe Tasting was where Grey Owl was, and so it needs to be something about Grey Owl. And that they talked a little bit about the school cars where people the train car would come on and they'd stay for whatever length of time and educate the kids and go on to the next whistle stop, so to speak. There's a lot of history from Sudbury to White River. And of course, in White River, home of Winnie the Pooh. So that's another, I mean, there were people on the train who were going to White River to just see Winnie the Pooh.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Teresa, I need to know this. What is it like going on this train with Bill? Is he somebody, like, does he point a lot of stuff out? Is he quiet? What's it like going on a trip with Backroads Bill?
Well, going on a trip with Backroads Bill actually enhanced the enthusiasm, because, he kept, at one point, I don't know, I said something, about, the train should have this. And he went on about, how might we do this? And kept asking all these probing questions. And then that led to Elizabeth and I sort of coming up with questions to ask the conductor. And it was just the enthusiasm. And I have a very quiet husband, and he was just looking out the window in awe and looking at rocks and stuff. But there was a people part of this journey. There absolutely was. And I would say for our little troop, Liz is already excited to book us in February to go back and see what happens with when it's white, and for sure, I can't wait to go.
Absolutely. I can't wait to go too. So again, the enthusiasm of Backroads Bill, for sure. But we were looking at this, I think, all the way along the way about in terms of marketing. That was your question, because we were thinking we wanted to know more about whatever it was, whether it was railway lingo or what we were kind of looking at, kind of thing, and those and interesting things, whether it was the bench or the derelict building that we'd come into a siding, and all those kinds of things that, again, we just don't see in our day-to-day lives, because the train, again, a different kind of mode of transportation. I'm not going to repeat myself, but we don't commute to work. We use our cars and our ATVs, I guess, and we hike and we bike and those kinds of things. But the train, again, just that's that motion and the moving landscape. It's like nothing else. Like we can sit at home and look at documentaries. It's way better than TV.
I'm going to ask this. You're going to give me your Bill answer. It's going to be like a non-answer. If you had the dream job, and don't say I'm already doing my dream job or something like that. What would be the dream job for you? Like, would going on a train and being a tour guide and being able to go up and down, and is that something that it would be, or is there one thing where you're like, if I could do this forever, I would be happy?
Oh, well, I've done some of that tour guide stuff, but I think that the dream job is to like on the train, to give that information out, to turn people on to what they're seeing, because seeing is believing, and we live in this vast, magnificent land. I guess I would be just like, maybe the dream job is like the announcer at the arena at a hockey game, and so but you're scoring all the way along. So yeah, that just like that kind of public address announcer.
But would you want to change, or would you be okay going up the same route all the time, or would you want to do like different routes, different parts of Ontario?
Oh.
Like, would you get kind of a little like tired or bored of the same?
Well, I can ask Teresa that. I mean, we're going to go back in February or thereabouts, and what I've got, would I've got back on the train the next day? My answer would have been yes, because I wanted to see, not that we missed anything, but you'd like to do that a number of times. It's like I never tire of Sammy D. Champlain Provincial Park. I've been in there 37 years. I never tire of nature. So would I tire of that? I don't know. The one thing would be all of us we're so relaxed, and I don't think any of us talked about anything other than meaningful stuff and with regards to the trip and things going on in our personal lives that were just related to all the outside things we've done with the kinship. So maybe ask Teresa that question about going up and down, but she's already kind of answered that. I suspect. Would you have gone the next day other than commitments?
Well, so it's interesting, but so Brian had also thought about, we take the train up and drive back. And I'm like, no, we got to take the train both ways. That's the experience. And I got excited about different things on the way up as I did on the way back. Because I was looking for specific things, and wanting to like capture them in a way that I could use them later artistically. So, it's definitely would I want to do the same pattern over and over again? I don't get bored of nature or looking at colors and looking at scenery, so I could do it. There's so much to do in Northern Ontario, though. That I probably want to try a few other routes along the way too, but I guess we don't really have that many train routes. So
I've thought about that, Ben, in the last few seconds. It would be like Captain Kirk. So I would want to be in charge of the transporter room, because we'd get in the transporter room.
You want to be the driver? You want to be the driver? Oh, no, the
transporter room.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then we would go there to all these places along that line or anywhere else, and have the explanation and be with nature, because that's what we all try to do to get our vitamin N.
Can I just say something about that analogy, though? Because the transporter room takes you from one place to the next, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be missing the whole point, which is the journey to get there? I stumped him. I stumped Bill. Got him. Only took 55 episodes.
Yeah, only 55 episodes. Anyway, the train ride is really, really worth it. And Teresa, any last thoughts about that train ride? That we've had a great conversation, but anything that comes to mind that you want to tell the listeners about the train ride? Because again, I think this in itself, however VIA does, I mean, they should put the links to these stories on, because we're marketing that train ride. I mean, you've probably told at least 10 people about the train ride. I have, for sure.
Oh, God, yeah. I sent links of your written story to every family member and friends. So for sure, the enthusiasm with the train ride was huge, and I guess I just feel that, like, in a final reflection was, I when I think about it, I just enjoyed the whole experience and the whole, it's part seeing nature in a different way. But there was no pressure. You could just look out the window and look at the beautiful scenery. You didn't have to, worry about your stop, because the conductor was, taking such conscientious care of making sure everybody, and there was a lady in a wheelchair. There was, it was just a sense of, there was other people that he was calling us train buffs. It was just a beautiful experience, and I can't wait to go again, and see it in a different light in the winter.
Yeah, no, that Village Media article, Backroads Bill, I think it's just called The Train. But anyway, I can say this. I'm just a meat and potatoes writer, but I can't write any better than that story, in description-wise, because I was immersed in that experience. I can't. I mean, I could a little bit, but no.
You can't say that. You can't say that.
No.
Magnum
when
opus.
You go after I mean, I don't like reading my stuff afterwards, but you could have said this, could have said that, but that detail and that emotion from the experience, as we've talked about today on the Backroads Bill podcast, that was really worth it, and I really encourage people to go out and take that bud car from Sudbury to White River. And thanks to Teresa today, for sure.
Yes, thank you, Teresa, so much for joining us.
No problem.
Well, a big thank you to Teresa for coming on the show. It sounds like it would be an amazing trip, and maybe, just maybe, Bill will one day moonlight as a tour guide. Now that would be one special ride, I tell you that. If you enjoyed this episode and want more, you can find new episodes of the Backroads Bill podcast on your favorite podcast players. The video version is on the North Bay Echo YouTube channel and, of course, on NorthBayEcho.ca. And you can also check out all of the other Echo podcasts we have while you're on there, like To North Bay with Love and Echo Essentials. And sign up for our newsletter, Echo Essentials. It comes to your inbox Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that wraps things up from us this week. But we will be back next week for another Backroads adventure.